I'm very excited and very thrilled in welcoming you, every one of you here to our very first episode, of Detox with Deep Talks. The main this initiative, is taken by Blossoms, and our main purpose of this initiative is to connect entrepreneurs, change makers, and experts with students and other aspiring entrepreneurs, so that we can learn about their journey, we can learn about their failures, their struggles, because in these times of social media where everyone is posting about their achievements, everyone is posting about their good times, it's equally important to embrace our failures and our struggles. And that is the main purpose of this initiative of Detox with Deep Talks, where we want to make people realize that failure is not the opposite of success, but it is a part of success, right? So with that said, welcome you all to our first episode. I'm Siddharth, and with me is Aditya and our other members of the Blossoms team. I and Aditya will be moderating the session, and we have a very special guest with us today for our very first episode. Mr. Tushar Aggarwal. So a very warm welcome you to Tushar, and thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, no, Mr. Just Tushar is good.
Okay,
But
Tushar.
great to be here, and yeah, happy to kind of kickstart it with a quick introduction. Unless you have some questions planned, happy to take it in whatever direction you
Yeah,
think is
sure.
best.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I can
Um.
just give a brief about you, and
Yeah,
then
we have prepared a short introduction for you.
you and
Oh,
then
sure. Let's do
yeah.
that. Yes.
So just to give a brief, Tushar is a CEO and founder of Persistence. He previously worked as a cryptocurrency and blockchain VC at LuneX Ventures and is a podcast host at Decrypt Asia. He's an ex-management consultant to the financial service industry with a keen interest in technology, entrepreneurship, investments, and racket sports. We're very happy to have you here, Mr. Tushar. And we also read your recent post about the 3.7 million initial coin offering funding that Persistence received, and many more congratulations on that. So maybe you can share more about Persistence in your journey now.
Absolutely. So, happy to first of all, keep it very informal. I think, I've been super blessed to have made a lot of mistakes, gone down the kind of, traditional career path and then, sort of course corrected.
Yeah.
So, happy to kind of talk about, what were more than talking about crypto itself, I think more in terms of what were the sort of mental models or the,
Yeah. The journey.
frameworks that I had in mind of why did I enter this industry and,
Mm-hmm.
why leave consulting behind and those kinds of things. And then what are some of the things that helped me? Because I think that is more helpful than just talking about crypto, because, I
Yeah.
don't think I can do justice, in a kind of quick session.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so I can kind of talk about. So I joined NTU in 2010, and happy to kind of talk about my story as well. So originally come from India, went to a boarding school in India, graduated in 2010. Um, had applied to kind of different universities and schools around the world, and ended up in Singapore. I was initially studying engineering in my first semester, but then I wasn't, I felt a little bit out of depth in terms of what my skill sets were and what I also wanted to do. So basically, built up a huge case with the dean of the business school that time to make a switch from engineering to
Oh
business.
yeah,
And so from
absolutely.
second, so from and it was, I don't know how easy or difficult it is to make a switch now, but it was really really difficult to make that switch. It involved emceeing a couple of important exams so that my grades didn't fall down, because you needed to keep your grades up to be
Okay.
able to make that switch.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, fortunately I was able to make that switch. Majored in did a double major in finance and marketing. Graduated in 2013, and so during my time I was in hall 9, and for the most part, and was decently active in terms of being part of JCRC, and played a lot of sports. While there, was part of the cricket team. Was part of the the hall, tennis, softball,
Mm-hmm.
squash team, including being the squash captain. And then graduated, and again, I think you guys seem to be a little bit more sort of switched on, but I was super confused in terms of what to do. And so kind of went down the beaten path of applying for jobs. And I didn't have any fancy internships when I was graduating. And so I think I remember applying for about 97, 98 jobs in the spreadsheet that I had.
Okay.
And in the end, I had two offers. One was from PwC. The other one was actually a very fascinating job offer, which was to be a mentor at this incubator in Accra in Ghana. So there's this company called Meltwater. They run, the Meltwater Entrepreneurial School of Technology in Ghana. And so I really wanted to go for that, but one of my friends who was a senior to me was doing that program, and during the 1 year he was there, he got, I think, malaria 3 times in that 1 year. And so my parents freaked out a little bit, and I couldn't fight them on this thing. And so I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, ended up taking a job at PwC, which was more around doing tax consulting, but primarily for the financial services industry. 6 months into that role, I kind of knew I didn't want to do that. And so the next kind of 12 to 15 months, I tried to make an internal move to the management consulting arm within PwC. And it did basically try to do everything that I could in terms of trying to network with the right folks. And sports was always my best way of networking. So it was part of the PwC tennis team, squash team, cricket team. But that unfortunately turned out to be unsuccessful. And so I started looking externally. And one of my tennis mates at PwC was moving to SIA Partners, which is a French consulting firm that was opening up an office in Singapore. And so made that jump from PwC to SIA Partners. And so went from a relatively bigger organization to working in like sort of a 10-person consulting firm. And so at SIA Partners, the initial learning curve was extremely steep in terms of, not having that kind of prior background of doing management consulting. And also, I think the amount of responsibility and ownership that you could take in a smaller organization was just something completely different, where suddenly you're advising, the C-suite executives of, financial institutions in Singapore, Hong Kong, without actually having too much more context. But I think what that kind of job taught me was that it doesn't matter, what your title is or how many years of experience you have, that, there's always something that you can teach other people, and there's always something that you can learn from from other people. And so it allowed me to kind of figure out how to not put people on a pedestal, where sometimes we think that someone is out of reach, or someone's done exceptionally well. And again, this may not be a problem for you guys, but it definitely was sort of a mental barrier in my head. Anyway, I mean, sort of a year into SIA Partners, I knew that was not what I wanted to do. In parallel, especially while doing consulting, I'd managed to save up a decent amount, and I'd been investing into real estate with my parents. And so kind of late 2016, I had one liquidity event. So I'd been working for about 3.5 years. I had a liquidity event, so I had some cash, and so I was looking to invest that cash into startups, and sort of do like a do investments where my downside would be 1x, which is essentially losing my principal, but the potential upside could be 10x. And so started sort of getting started slacking a little bit at work, but then started increasing my engagement with a bunch of different accelerators and incubators to start getting exposed to the entrepreneurial or the tech ecosystem in Singapore and Southeast Asia. So started working with this accelerator called Supercharger, which I don't even know how active they are. Murudi, again, I think that's been decommissioned. But in the process, met a bunch of interesting people. Met some people who kind of pointed me to crypto, and I think there's one gentleman that I met who, when I was looking to either join a startup or invest in startups, mentioned that when you join like a traditional startup, it's sort of you're walking up a staircase for your personal growth, but crypto is like sort of getting on an escalator while you're trying to climb up the stairs. And that sort of stuck with my head, and so started investing in cryptocurrencies towards kind of late 2016, early 2017. And for some of you that may remember or may have seen the kind of boom in 2017,
Oh yes.
I did exceptionally, so did exceptionally well on my personal portfolio. And by October 2017, I quit my job, and by that time I had spent about 7 years in Singapore. So took a 6 month sort of break to give myself some breathing room to do things within the crypto space. And so kind of October 2017 to March 2018, tried to see different, had a bunch of calls with different people, tried to see what was the best way to get involved, applied for a bunch of jobs unsuccessfully. And then realized that, okay, again, I don't know if you guys follow, like I'm super active on Twitter, and I would like really encourage, folks on the call to get active on Twitter. I think it's, everything, I think a lot of things that I've learned about, I think business and life, has been from, folks on Twitter. So, some of the kind of very cliched folks now who are not cliched back in like 2015 when I started following them, folks like Naval and, Chamath, Gary Vee had a little bit of an influence, although, people have, strong opinions about him in terms of liking him or disliking him. So followed a bunch of these people, learned about, content creation as a tool to create that network. And again, these are things that, may come to you naturally, but like it didn't, I needed someone else to tell me and create that blueprint. I was pretty lost. And so, from that perspective, I'd been following these people from 2015. And so it was at the back of my head that I should start a podcast. But I wanted to start a podcast just interviewing extremely successful people. But since I'd been investing in crypto, I decided to start a crypto podcast instead. So started the podcast, and the first episode went live in March 2018. I started writing for Tech in Asia, yourstory.com, as a sort of a byproduct of, of hosting the podcast. And then a bunch of people, saw read what I wrote, and, heard the podcast and started reaching out. One of the folks was someone from Golden Gate Ventures who was looking to set up a crypto fund. And so, essentially, I'd been in India for about a 6 month period hosting these podcasts. Once I started getting all these inbound emails, moved back to Singapore in sort of, Q2 2018. So around April, May, had a bunch of meetings. So met everyone from the industry, from the blockchain and cryptocurrency industry, back to back to create that network. And one of the people I met was Kendrick, who was from Golden Gate Ventures, setting up this fund. And essentially, how I'm talking to you guys in terms of talking about my story, some of my beliefs, was telling him about some of the principles that I live my life by, my beliefs, what I think about crypto, what is my thesis on different cryptocurrencies. And essentially he told me that he was setting up this fund. So I requested for a job, which he gave on the spot. And so worked at LuneX for about 1.5 years. And then my thought process was that, so now I'd spent about 10 years in Singapore and 9 years in Singapore, and wanted to leverage on the fact that I come from India, but had spent so much time in Singapore and had created a global network. So while I was in Singapore, attended a lot of conferences, helped out everyone I could. And so created a solid network in Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Beijing, Seoul, in Asia, and then a little bit in Berlin, London, and then a little bit in SF, New York, which are the sort of epicenters of crypto around the world. And so created that network, and then what I wanted to do, what my thought process was, or my thesis was that India has the third largest number of startups globally. Third largest number of unicorns globally today. So about 25 to 30 at any given time, which is the third largest after the US and China. And 80% of these startups were born after the year 2010, which was almost 10 to 15 years after startups of similar sizes came about in the US and China. So my thought process was that something similar was going to happen in the Indian crypto ecosystem as well, where Indian crypto ecosystem was going to pop, but that pop happens with a slight lag. And so I wanted LuneX to bet on the Indian ecosystem, but LuneX kind of didn't have that vision to to bet on Indian startups, Indian entrepreneurs as an investor.
Mhm.
And so I, in my personal capacity, would keep flying to India and attend hackathons and events, to try and meet developers, because that was the missing piece. Because I had the global network, and I
Yeah.
knew I could raise capital. I knew I was going to start Persistence, um, and so came down to India to create that network of developers, and yeah, so ran Persistence sort of from Singapore while holding my job at LuneX for a few months, and then kind of October last year decided to make that full-time switch. And so I've been running
So,
Persistence for about
mhm.
14 months now, and yeah, happy to talk about that experience as well. And but yeah, it's been knock on wood, been a phenomenal year in terms of that fundraise. A team is we have a team of 18 people now across
Oh,
business and tech.
that's great.
Um, and yeah, I mean, just trying to build a global brand. We have we're trying to build, and again, crypto, like a lot of other businesses, I think will be extremely community driven in the future. And so from the get go, we're building communities in China, in Korea, in the US, which are sort of very strategic locations as far as crypto is concerned.
Mhm.
And then building communities in some of the smaller active countries as well. So non-English speaking. So
Yeah.
Thailand, Vietnam, Russia, and so um, today we have a global set of miners mining our cryptocurrencies. We have global communities.
Mhm.
We have users from around the world. We're building products for the world, and that's one of the most beautiful things about a crypto company, that you can sort
Beautiful
of be
phenomenon.
global from day one.
Yeah.
But yeah, essentially that's been sort of my my journey. I can kind of I know you guys have some questions, but can talk about some of the sort of underlying principles in terms of like what drove my decision making and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Actually, we wanted to know,
yeah,
the same, that the decision making, because you said, you're working in a big company, PwC, and then you decided to switch it, to a smaller company, and then eventually, starting a company. So, like, how was, that, mindset from, a
yeah,
stable corporate job to a maybe a high
yeah,
risk but high return. So, how is the mindset?
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, and that's put very well in terms of that high risk and high return. The way I think is, especially in today's context where interest rates are next to nothing,
Hmm.
and the Fed has printed so much money. There's just so much availability of capital, and if you're a little bit entrepreneurial as well, um, you know, I think instead of going to a large corporation, especially when you're young, and if you have a little bit of a buffer or that risk appetite,
Hmm.
um, I think it's a no-brainer to try and build something. Again, not everyone is built for building something, just because of the kind of responsibility and ownership that you have to take, the pressures that come with
Yeah.
raising external capital. But I think in general, if you have that mindset, and as now it's sort of become a cliche, but as Jeff Bezos puts it, like you want to be you want to try and hit a home run on every ball. And the beautiful thing about business is that you have sort of unlimited tries. And um and in business you only need to sort of connect once, and if you connect once, and if you hit hard enough, then that sort of carries you for the rest of your life. And so but you have unlimited at bats, and so you want to take that shot every single time, right? And so I'm
Yeah.
a huge believer in optionality in life.
Hmm.
Some of you are studying business, so what are options? I think life is sort of a call option, right? 1x downside, 100x upside.
100x.
um and
Absolutely.
and you go and you go long on life. And so I think from that perspective, that was always my thought process.
Hmm.
In whatever job that I had, good bosses, bad bosses, at some level I always had some problem with authority, in general.
Yeah.
I always had like I hate waking up in the morning. Always had a problem with that. Like I always, like it's just like I'm very nocturnal, and so
I
like
think we all can
these were
relate to it.
small. Yeah, and so these are small things that, like, why should you have to go to work at 9:30 a.m. or 10 a.m., right? And I think companies are realizing that. But you know um why should you have to? And again, the pandemic has changed things
Change things.
significantly now, where
Mm.
yeah, but I mean, again, just having that flexibility in life in terms of working from wherever you want to, in terms of working the hours that you want to, and those kinds of things, I think. So that was a big part of it. But I think more from a framework perspective, I think one of the things that really helped me is, I talk about like 1x downside, 100x upside, right? But how do you get that 100x upside?
Mm.
Yeah.
How do you create that leverage? So today, fundamentally, there are three things that three tools that are available to any individual or to any company that allows you to leverage up, and that's capital, media, technology. Um,
Mm.
and so from that perspective, what do I mean by that? So the podcast was the media aspect. What you guys are doing here is the media aspect, right? Where you're trying to create a brand,
Yeah.
where you're trying to create a community. Um, and essentially, what I wanted to do with the podcast was, because I wasn't being able to penetrate into certain organizations or get connected to some folks. I just started hosting a podcast and built a little bit of an audience so that I would
Mm.
get access to individuals. And in the process, created a personal brand, which then kind of over a period of time it compounds. And so it's similar to, say, if you have 10,000 followers on Instagram versus 100,000, or 10,000 on Twitter versus 100,000.
Mm.
The amount of leverage that you have in case you build a product is huge, right? So if you have
Yeah.
a large following, a large audience, and today every individual is sort of a media company in their own right. And again, regardless of whether you're introverted, extroverted, you can find a medium or a platform that works best for you, whether it's short form written on Twitter, long form on Medium or Substack, audio on a podcast, video through a YouTube channel, Patreon.
Yeah.
But essentially every individual, or just like just LinkedIn posts, or it could be anything.
Mm.
So figure out the media aspect first, and then realize the power of media in general, of knowing journalists, of being able to how media allows you to create that sort of brand, that credibility, over a period of time. The second is capital. And so I had 100K of my own money, or $10 million of other people's money. And so how do you leverage up? How do you leverage up capital?
Mhm.
So leveraging up a capital is just through other people's money, whether as a fund manager or even as an entrepreneur, because you're building on by raising capital from other people. And within capital, I would sort of break capital into human capital and just like money itself.
Mm.
And so raising money allows you to then sort of hire folks who then can, and that's another way to leverage up, right? Because I only have 24 hours in a day. And so if I want to put out my ideas into the world at scale, I need to convince people of my vision, or help to make make their vision sort of come true as well, and sort of work in this
Yeah.
way where you can put out ideas and at scale into the world. And so that was capital, and that's what I kind of got to do at LuneX as well, in terms of
Mhm.
managing money. And then the third thing was technology, which is Gmail can be built for 1 million people, or 1 billion people. The product essentially remains the same, but you can get scale. The marginal cost with
Yeah. For
technology
scaling it. Yeah.
is exactly is so it's very easy to scale tech products. So truly, the best companies today, if you see, or the best individuals, leverage on these aspects very well. The media aspect, the capital aspect, and capital being whether it's money or human capital, and then the technology aspect. And so at Persistence, it was the culmination of all these three, where with the podcast it was kind of siloed. With LuneX it was just kind of only capital, although you're investing in tech. But at Persistence it's like truly leveraging up capital, media, tech, all at the same time. And so and then of course like I'd been investing prior to LuneX as well. At LuneX also I've made 5 angel investments now, which
Mhm.
is so I have a decent like growing angel portfolio. and in a lot of cases have been the first money into startups, especially within the blockchain crypto domain, because that's where I have expertise. um, and so so that's kind of been my sort of biggest framework in terms of getting scale, leveraging up. And this is a concept that most people don't understand. Most people trade their time for money. So I'll work 9 to 6, and I get paid
Yeah.
X amount. um, but this concept of scale, this concept of leverage, is something that doesn't come naturally to people. And I think this has been one of the biggest, I think, decision making factors. And even now it's like, now there are like 200 messages that you receive on like Telegram and WhatsApp and LinkedIn and
Yeah.
and emails. And so and I only have limited time, right, in terms of and then in that same time I have to think about product and legal and compliance and fundraising and marketing and community building and operations and finance, while sort of uh, taking care of sort of your personal relationships and your health and those kinds of things. So now it's now that like, for example, even at Persistence, last year and this
Hmm.
year, especially because of COVID, it was existential for us, right, where we don't have enough money in the bank, where I even thought of, like, say, cutting salaries. And then sort of being in the other side of the position where suddenly you have cash in the bank, and then you're able to hire people, and then what, like, then what do you do, then how do you spend your time? And so taking that step back, working on yourself, to be like, and to create sort of that next level of leadership within the organization, where
Hmm.
other people can take on that stress, or create those buffers, where, like, my job now is just to think. And as a CEO, there are, I believe, 4 things that I need to do and do well. And if I do those well, then I don't need to do anything. And which is, first is
Yeah.
figuring out the story, right? So I need to be able to storytell, because you're storytelling to investors, you're storytelling to potential employees, to whenever you're doing BD, you're storytelling. Second is fundraising. Third is using those funds to hire people. And then creating the fourth is creating the right culture in the company, so that the company can scale. And so we were able to make that transition very quickly, into that sort of hiring and now culture creation. So
Hmm.
all sort of within the last sort of 1.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I think
Go on.
Tushar, really put it like nicely about media, capital, and tech. Because these are the assets that any individual has access to. And I completely agree with your point. If we use like we should start with media, build a brand, build a story, and then leverage on other aspects. So I think that's great point. Being students, being starting with our journey, we sometimes feel that we are not that we are not like empowered much. We don't have the right skill sets. But if we have a like a bigger, like if we understand the bigger picture, we realize that we do have access to a lot of resources. So I completely agree on that. So in the beginning, we talked about failures. So maybe we can deep dive into it. So Tushar, so what was the, because running a startup is all about you fail 95 times and then the 5% you succeed. So how what were your failures? How dealt with your failures?
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I think, I mean, in general, I mean, there are big failures and there are small failures. I mean,
Mhm.
again, these are all like cliched things that I'm just repeating. But yeah, I mean, again, it's, yeah, like, I can't pinpoint and say, okay, like, this was a big failure. I think there are obviously small setbacks,
Yeah.
on a continuous basis, right? But
Mm.
I mean, you only fail if you just, like, if you give up, right? Again, like, these are just like cliched statements, but if you just like keep at it, and hence the name Persistence as well, right? Because, like, I truly think, um like that defines like me and like my
Yeah.
co-founders. I think we've all sort of we have very sort of unique backgrounds in our own rights, and we've persisted against those odds. um, and so I think from that perspective, like big failures, you can't really pinpoint and say, okay, yeah, but yeah, I mean, like small failures,
Yeah.
you've been working on a deal for 6 months and it doesn't go
And it
through,
doesn't.
or you try fundraising, like this year, March, I was in SF trying to fundraise, and you're literally getting there's COVID, your bank balance is low, and you're not being able to raise from anyone, and just dealing with that pressure. Where like for the first time I had like like the people talk about cold sweats at night, and so for the first time I had that, and just dealing with that, like it's not like a failure, but like in that moment you feel like this is the end of the world. And then you look back and you're like, yeah, like shit, like I can deal with that. So again, I think there's like small setbacks, rejections, but again, the industry that I'm in is just so new. It's
Yeah.
such a blue ocean. There is no sort of clear path. You're sort of defining the path as you go along. It's an experiment, truly. Like I think a lot of tech is just experimental now, because a lot of the basic things have already been done.
Mm.
And so everything is just sort of that incremental change. Or again, in crypto's case, it's just like a huge like $500 billion sort of, which is the market cap of crypto. It's just like a science experiment, to be honest. But if it succeeds, then it's going to be huge, which I'm betting on.
Mm.
But if it fails, it fails. Like $500 billion in today's context is nothing to run a science experiment. So um, you know and that's truly the case, right? So whether
Yeah.
you look at every bleeding edge tech, whether it's space, defense, biotech, AI, robotics, autonomous driving, crypto, it's all so experimental. The amount of money that it takes to bring these technologies to life, it just takes a huge amount of capital. But as the last sort of 3-4 decades have shown us, once that tech comes in, it just, and someone is, initially it's obviously the researchers and the enthusiasts who drive the adoption of that tech. And once it reaches a certain inflection point and there's mass adoption, um, then because you can scale so quickly and scale at a global level, and so there's definitely that premium that's placed on tech companies. Like today persistence is valued at $25 million. Like does that make sense? I don't know, right? I mean, like, can we justify that? Maybe not, right? But like investors pay that premium because
Of
that's
the
the value
future
that
that lies ahead, I guess. The future value.
they exactly. And it's very similar to the analogy that I draw is of today's VCs and entrepreneurs, and maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but I think
Mm-hmm.
this resonates with people. Is um, you know like the Americas was discovered in like I think 1492, like in the 15th century. So literally
Mm-hmm.
just 500 years ago, people would lose their lives in to try and find America, right? Like that's how, like today we just take a flight and we don't think about it. But and it was the kings in Europe, so Spain, Portugal, the UK,
Mm-hmm.
France, that subsidized these journeys, these expeditions, these voyages
Mm-hmm.
for sailors who would take that risk, and because these kings had surplus capital, right? And today that's the VCs
The
who
VCs.
raise money from people who have surplus capital to play around, um, and and then deploy into entrepreneurs who want to go into uncharted territories, right? So, and because the kings also knew that if the sailors discovered new lands, then the upside was going to be so huge. So why does Europe still have money
Absolutely.
today? It's because of the investments that the kings made 500 years ago, and all these expeditions that were launched in the 15th, 16th, 17th century to
Mm.
find new land. Um, and as entrepreneurs, that's what we're doing. We're raising capital from people who have surplus capital today, to go out and experiment and try
Experiment.
new things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so um, Yeah, I mean, and to me, it's like a no-brainer to do, right? Like, and I think for anyone who's ambitious, anyone, it's like, um, either work at a startup to learn and acquire the skills to be able to start your own thing, or if you don't want to start your own thing, just be early employees, because that's how you get leverage through
Yeah.
that ESOPs or equity at that company. But essentially, in my head, like how we started also, and it's good to hear that the kind of narrative and thought process at NTU itself has changed, because when I was in university and I was graduating, literally everyone wanted to be a banker or a consultant. um, and yeah, like, and it's crazy, like my sister just graduated. She goes to Hong Kong University, HKU,
Uh-huh.
and graduated this summer, and all of her batchmates. So I mean, like, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe you guys are the anomalies, but I think the general consensus is that you just get, like, a safe job, your
Good
parents
job.
invest a
Yeah.
little bit, yeah, invest that money to get that education, and so you feel that obligation to your parents to get that return on investment, to sort of be like, okay, I can get a high paying job, and that's your definition of success. But truly, like, few things that I would highly encourage is thinking from that place of how to leverage up in whatever way, right? And not everyone needs to be leveraged up, but especially if you're ambitious, having that long term mindset. It's very easy to get that 10,000, $15,000 salary per month. It just seems like all the money in the world at some level when you're graduating.
Lot more.
But yeah, but if you take that that lower paying job in the middle, in the beginning, to align yourselves with folks who you think can leverage up, who you think can open up doors for you, um, then and again, it takes that investment, it takes that long term horizon, it takes that patience. But I think that allows you to, like, set yourself sort of apart, from everyone else. And in the short term, yeah, like, your friends might be balling and going to whatever C'est La Vie and all those the fancy places.
Clubs.
But yeah, but again, like, true, like, first of all, even if you're working for a startup or something, you'd get paid well enough today. But secondly, um, even if you don't have that, I think it's is truly depending on the individual. I mean, that's how I think, is that it's completely fine to not have that FOMO, that okay, like, like, my friend is getting that job at that hedge fund, or my friend is getting that job at whatever, like, Goldman
Yeah.
Sachs front office.
Mhm.
Because truly, it's like a status thing at that point. It's But if we talk about, like, success or wealth creation, and if those are the goals, then that long term mindset, like, you guys will be like whatever 21, 22, some Singaporeans in the call, maybe like 25, 26 even, at the time of graduation. But like, you have to realize how young that is, right? It's just insane that you could just basically like, for the next 5 years, 10 years, and still be so young, that you can just keep making those mistakes again and again. But that compounding of those lessons that you learn will just be so insane, and at that at some level, that is celebrated in the world today.
Yeah.
And so no one gives permission to people to fail, or to, like, not do well, or to, like, right. But
Mhm.
like, and that's the biggest thing, right? I think from a thought process perspective, I wish someone was telling me these things when I was in university. I kind of went down the beaten path of that corporate gig, and then the second corporate gig, before um having to take that leap of faith, and be like, okay, I'm going to be unemployed for 6 months, because that paycheck, like, it's addictive.
Yeah. It's a
And
dopamine boost.
especially, absolutely. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I think those are a few things I would encourage everyone to do. Like, stay patient, realize how young you are,
Mhm.
do things for the long term, build leverage in whatever way, in whatever you're doing, if
Mhm.
possible. Yeah, I think those are some of the key things, and these are things I remind myself every day still, right? in terms of decision making. And so whether you're doing a deal with someone or you're trying to fund everything that you're doing, you keep these basic principles of like being very aggressive in the short term, but long term I'm very patient. Always trying to build that leverage. And so yeah, and giving yourself permission to fail, that be like, okay, like
Yeah, absolutely.
obviously you hate losing, but like, and you want to win really bad, but even if it happens, it's not a big deal. So yeah, I think these are some basic principles.
Exactly. I completely agree, with your point, and connecting it to, again, failures, because of this whole social media thing, people have like started, like have forgotten, to embrace their failures, as you truly said, like, getting a job, at the like top corporate, in top corporations, has become kind of a mindset with people. And through this series, we're trying to change that mindset. We're trying to bring the entrepreneurial spirit, within students. So I think, it was, great lessons, great learnings. Adi, do you have any questions?
No, I think like maybe like we want to know your motivation and so, but then I think you have answered all those questions already. Your motivation behind cryptocurrency and etc. Trying new things.
Yeah.
Maybe we can ask one more question about crypto.
Maybe
a short one.
We can dive a bit deeper into crypto. Maybe like
a short one. Yeah.
We just want to know your opinion on the recent highest crypto hit. Like it is the three-year highest price the Bitcoin in specific has hit and so, right? So what's your opinion on that and what's your take? So we can learn more about it as well.
Yeah. I mean, I can do another 10 minutes. So if there are questions from other folks as well, happy to take that. But yeah, in terms of crypto, again, I think it's I truly think it's sort of like a generational bet of sorts, right? It's again, I didn't have the chance to be involved in the development of companies like or be early in like Amazon or Google or even like the Facebooks and the Ubers of the world. And so I mean, from a career perspective, I thought, okay, like what are my skill sets, and then how can I use some of these skill sets, and what would be the industry, and kind of try to think very deeply in terms of what that would be. And so kind of zero down on crypto. It's funny that everyone talks about crypto only when the prices are high, but not when but again, I think with anything, I think see, if you want to you know again, it's a bet, right? It's and it's like what are the things where the downside is 1x but the upside is 100x if it succeeds. And so and then how does that relate to my skill set? And so like, I'm not an engineer, I can't code, and so what are the different, I like thought about different things that I could do, and crypto was that. And so from a career perspective, obviously I'm betting on crypto succeeding. 100% of my net worth is in crypto at the moment.
Okay.
And in terms of sort of in fact more than 100%, because I've leveraged up a little bit, so taken out a loan to loan against my crypto to buy more crypto. And so, and that's because I have belief in it, right? And so it's, and why is that belief there? I mean, you look at some macro factors, right? Like with the Fed printing so much money, you look at the history of money itself, and the sort of gold standard being eliminated in the 70s, and and what the role of gold has been historically, and how everything is moving digital. And so why not why not gold itself? And then of course some of the inefficiencies that exist in terms of, especially like cross-border transactions, right? Where if you wire money from a cross-border perspective, for most transactions, if you settle via Swift, still settles on a T+2, T+3 basis, doesn't settle on weekends. In a world where everything is digital, a lot of fees involved, all of those things, right? And then and so I think from those perspectives, and in general, people don't want to with interest rates being low, people want to get exposed to riskier and riskier asset classes. And so I think, and then talking about like how like millennials or Gen Z think, and the kind of assets that they want to have exposure to. like you would like, I don't think most people would want to get exposure to like a capital and REIT, right? In general, like, and so like, what are those asset classes that, folks would, want exposure to? Um,
Mhm.
and so in that respect, like collectibles is a big thing within the crypto space, and digital collectibles,
Mhm.
and like, like trading of sneakers and things like that, trading of like,
Mhm.
other collectibles is already huge in the US, and it's
Mhm.
only a matter of time before it becomes huge in Asia.
Yeah.
um
Actually,
and
we
during
have
COVID.
one question on the
Yeah,
same, topic. Maybe I can
yeah,
elaborate. That is, how does, Moinak is asking, how does mining
yeah.
cryptocurrency work? So I think,
So there is, if you go deeper into, crypto, there are two consensus mechanisms that are really popular: proof of work, which
mhm.
Bitcoin and Ethereum follow today, and there is a newer consensus mechanism called proof of stake. Mining for proof of work and proof of stake, happens in different ways today. So proof of work, it kind of started, you could use CPUs initially, back in 2008, 2009, 10 for Bitcoin, to mine Bitcoin. And then in 2015, 2016, you could use CPUs to mine, Ethereum. But today, and then over a period of time, people started using GPUs and more efficient ways to mine. And today, you have very dedicated equipment, with, ASIC, servers, which are used to mine, Bitcoin, Ethereum. So mining
Mhm.
Bitcoin, Ethereum has become super difficult. In fact, one of the subsidiaries of Persistence is an entity called Audit,
Okay.
where we mine crypto as well. In fact, that's the biggest revenue generator for us at the moment. Um, but we're focused exclusively on proof of stake, um, consensus mechanism chains. So some of the newer blockchains, like you can look at Cosmos, Polkadot. Ethereum itself is in fact moving from proof of work to proof of stake. Um, and so essentially, for proof of stake, at least at the moment, you don't need dedicated equipment. You can run in the cloud. And even though from a cost efficiency perspective, we have sort of dedicated bare metal servers, um, in tier 3, tier 4 data centers, where we mine crypto, but you could essentially run from your a normal sort of PC or laptop itself by mining it in the cloud. But proof of stake is more about being able to attract stake to your node. And so
Mhm.
you need to convince other people why they should delegate their stake to you, as opposed to just being able to run, dedicated, hardware, or run, instances in
Mhm.
the cloud.
Yeah.
So, but I think from that perspective, then you kind of dig into the open source nature of this industry, where if you're building some sort of tooling, or if you're contributing to the community, finding bugs, or something like that,
Mhm.
then people have belief in your ability and your validator node, and so they delegate. um, yeah, so there are some cryptocurrencies that advertise, being able to mine using a phone, but I would try to stay away from that. So I would, usually, because again, it just it'll, there's a lot of scams, and a lot of sort of malware that sort of goes around,
Mhm.
as well. And so I think from that perspective, I wouldn't try to do that, and
Recommend
I
using
would
a phone.
definitely, yeah, do some due diligence on the kind of crypto that you're mining, and its long-term prospects, also, because it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to mine something which doesn't have long term this thing,
Mhm.
because it's just not, it doesn't make enough financial sense.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely,
yeah,
Tushar. I think that was very insightful, and inspirational session about your insights, your journey with persistence. I think the name itself is a very it says it all, right? Persistence. So, that's what entrepreneurs require. That is persistence. So I think very thoughtful name there. Uh,
thank you.
if there are not any more questions, I think we are already ahead of we are already uh, ahead of the schedule. So I think uh, let's end the session
Sure.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And once again, Tushar, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your insights. Thanks a lot for your motivation. We'll make sure that we'll spread this message to more and more people in our N2 community. and within the Blossoms community as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing is, we're always looking to hire. So, if you have any interesting folks, and but ideally we want folks who have who have done something in the industry itself, or who have a deep enough interest, because there's 200 ways in terms of how to get involved in the industry. But if I know you guys are some in second year, third year, fourth year, but if you show even, I think, a little bit of initiative, and you have that hunger and hustle, then always looking to hire. And
definitely, I know a couple of people in definitely this call only. They're looking for jobs. Maybe we can send you their resumes and send you the profiles. We can connect.
Absolutely, very happy to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks a lot, Tushar. Thanks a lot for your insights, and thanks a lot, everyone, for joining the call.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you. We'll stay connected.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.